Hey guys, it's Kevin with my review for Infinite. So what Infinite's essentially about is basically we center on a world in which there are these basically superhumans known as Infinites, and essentially what they are these people that whenever they die, they are reincarnated into a different person, but they have the same, DNA or whatever. Sometimes they remember, sometimes they don't, but they take on different forms and essentially never die. And we center on this character of Evan McCauley, who is someone that has previously been an Infinite, but his entire memory has been wiped, and he has no idea of his, past life or anything like that. But he is basically tasked to take down this group called the Nihilists, which want to bring down all of the Infinites and basically exterminate all life on Earth, and he has to do what he can to overall prevent that. So, Infinite, I was not very excited for this film. Look, here's the thing. I understand that, there's a lot of potential with this concept, whether it be the director, whether it be the cast, but this is one of those movies that was supposed to come out a while ago in theaters, and obviously, pandemic delayed a bunch of stuff, but this is a film that was supposed to come out in September. I remember I saw a release date that it was supposed to come out then, and then suddenly it wasn't anymore, and then all of a sudden it was dropping on Paramount Plus a week before there was even, a couple weeks before it was slated to come out. That's when the announcement happened, and that's never a good sign for any film. So the fact that they were just kind of the fact that they were just kind of dumping it onto Paramount Plus did not really inspire a lot of confidence, but I was really hoping that maybe this film could surprise me, and it sucks. It's really not that shocking to say that Infinite is a terrible movie. This is a film that I think has some really interesting ideas, but it is upended by such a haphazard and overly convoluted and confusing screenplay that makes so many terrible decisions and really just makes it one of the most baffling films I've seen all year. But we're just getting to right now, starting off with the cast, and I gotta say that's actually one of the worst things about this movie. I think when it comes to the cast here, there are so many choices where I'm just kind of questioning what they were really thinking when it came to the roles, when it came to the actors in this film. Let's take Mark Wahlberg, for example. A capable actor. Absolutely. Mark Wahlberg is a good actor. But this kind of role does not suit him. Absolutely not. It does not suit him. And I feel like the Mark Wahlberg we get in this film is the kind of Mark Wahlberg that just doesn't really give a shit. It doesn't really feel like he wants to be here. He is so underplayed in terms of his emotion. This is a character that is supposed to be the savior, and Wahlberg plays it like he doesn't give a shit. And it's honestly really embarrassing to watch just how little emotion he gives, but also how unconvincing he is in this role. You don't buy for a second that this is the guy that's supposed to be saving everyone, that this is the guy that's going to restore faith in the Infinites overall. You just don't buy into it, and so I think he just did a really terrible job here, but I don't really think it's his fault. I think he's honestly just miscast in this film. And I've looked into it before, Wahlberg was not the initial choice for this role, and I don't think he should have stayed that way. I think that this was definitely a horrible casting choice on their part. Again, Wahlberg is a good actor, but in roles like this, where he's supposed to be this guy that everyone's looking up to, but he seems like he could not care any less, it's just really not convincing at all, and it's probably one of his worst performances yet. But honestly, as bad as Wahlberg is, surprisingly, Chiwetel Ejiofor, I'm sorry to say, gives him a run for his money here, because I honestly don't know what's worse. Downplaying emotions and almost exhibiting none, and almost being completely emotionally wrought of anything, or overplaying it to the point where it feels like you're in a Shakespearean play, because that's exactly what Chiwetel Ejiofor is doing here. I mean, he is overacting to the point of absurdity, to the point where I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people just end up laughing at his performance, because it is so goofy what he's doing in this movie. He's in another movie entirely, and I don't know what's going on with Chiwetel Ejiofor lately. Chiwetel Ejiofor, I think, is a really strong actor. I mean, hell, he gave such a masterful performance in 12 Years a Slave, but I feel like recently he has not really been on a good track. He's kind of been on a downward spiral for a while, and it really does show here, because his performance in this film is just so hokey, and it doesn't really fit with what this character is supposed to be. And so as a result, there's no chemistry between Wahlberg and Ejiofor. Like, these two are really supposed to be at odds with one another, and it really just feels like they're in two completely different movies. And it just, when these two performances are not working, the rest of the film utterly fails, unfortunately, and they are absolutely one of the worst things about this movie. I think, honestly, both of them were just really badly miscast here. I love Chiwetel Ejiofor. I do like Mark Wahlberg as an actor, but neither of them really fit these roles at all, and it just results in just such bad and frequently annoying performances from both of them. Now, I will say, the rest of the cast really is not that bad here. Sophie Cookson, I really liked what she ended up doing in this film. She was probably the best performance here for me. I thought she was the one that seemed like she was into it. She seemed like she was generally trying to, roll with the punches, and I enjoyed what she ended up doing in this film as the character of Nora. Jason Mantzoukas, I thought was going to be really annoying, but I actually kind of liked him. I didn't think that he was too bad here overall. Dylan O'Brien is not in this movie for that much, but for what he has, he does do an alright job. And then Toby Jones is here, but I don't really remember what he did, but he was good from what I remember. Look, the majority of the people in this movie are bad. The majority of the performances in this film are not very good, but the ones that are good are one of the few things that do actually sort of keep this film somewhat watchable, and so I will definitely give them credit with that, but in terms of acting, definitely leaves a lot to be desired overall. Alright, now let's get to the directing and the writing, which this is easily, I think, the thing that was most disappointing about this movie, is that when going into this film, even though I wasn't looking forward to it, I expected at least for there to be really competent directing, because the director of this film is Antoine Fuqua, and this is not a guy that attaches himself to just mediocre projects. Well, there is The Equalizer too, but aside from that, he doesn't usually attach himself to, projects that are just absolute garbage. He doesn't usually do that. He attaches himself to things that he is passionate about, and to me, it feels like he kind of got swindled into directing this film. This was something where this was a business deal. Someone came up to him, said, "Hey, Antoine, you want to direct this movie?" He had no idea what it was, and as a result, there is no directorial flair from Fuqua here. There was no point in this movie where I felt like I was watching an Antoine Fuqua film. It doesn't have the authenticity his films usually do. It certainly doesn't deliver in terms of action either. His directing isn't very noticeable here. It doesn't really feel like he put any effort into this movie directing wise, and it was really disappointing for me. I thought he at least would be the thing to save it, but no, you don't feel any sense of his usual directorial flair or the usual tropes that an Antoine Fuqua film usually does have. And any traces of his, regular directorial style are completely obscured here. You don't, for a second, feel like this is an Antoine Fuqua film, and that was just really disappointing for me. Like I said, I thought he would be the thing to redeem it, but that's not the case at all. He really did not put any effort into this movie, and I have to imagine it was one of those things where they needed a big-name director to put their name on this, and Fuqua stepped up to the plate, but he had no real creative vision, and it's just really disappointing to see. Now, I gotta say, as bad as his directing is, or as, basically useless as it is, as empty as it is, The screenplay is absolutely the worst thing about this entire film. I mean, look, the concept of this movie I don't think is a bad one. I actually really do like the idea that you have these characters, you have these different factions where you have the believers, where they basically think that, remembrance is a gift. This is something that was done to make the world better. But then you also have the nihilists, where basically they see it then as a curse and just constantly want to die and want everyone else to die as a result, and feel that basically humanity needs to be restored in that way, and basically, just like bring everything down. I think that's a really good concept. But when you present it in such a haphazard and lazy manner, to the point where I think literally everything is done through exposition and neither side feels fleshed out, you have what is instead just such a messy and very confusing screenplay. And I don't think this movie should be that confusing, because again, it's pretty straightforward what's going on, but there were so many points watching this film where I'm like, wait, what's happening here? How did this character come into the fold? What is really going on in this story? It's very hard to tell at points because the film does not do a very good job of really getting us to understand what's going on. Instead, you have a character who is told everything really quickly, and because of the fact, like I said, that Wahlberg is not really delivering in this role, you have about as little of a reaction to it as he really does. And I think that's another thing that really does bring this movie down, is that Evan as a character is not really a good guy. We don't know really a lot about him. We know that he suffers from schizophrenia of some sorts. They sort of introduced that in the beginning of the movie, but that quickly is not, brought up again. It's kind of just like put on the back burner very quickly. Other than that, he's kind of just like the audience. He's the guy that is being assigned this role, but he doesn't really seem like he knows what to do. He doesn't really seem like he has any care into what he's doing, and so this is kind of a very unlikable lead character, and you don't really have any reason to want to follow him here. And I was just so baffled that, like, this was the writing for this lead character. Why did you make him so inherently likable, and why did you make him so boring? I mean, there's nothing to latch onto when it comes to Evan as a character, and I understand that, like, he's supposed to be one of many versions of this character, and as the film goes on, he starts to, like, slowly piece things together, but the way it's done, one, is incredibly predictable. It's very obvious, I feel like, from the second this movie starts to when we first meet Mark Wahlberg's character, to what's actually going on here. We know what his past life was. We know what he's engaged in. None of this was surprising to me. But they also don't really do a good job, again, of presenting this information to you. So the believer side already, you just don't really care much for. You're not that invested into it. The nihilist side, on the other hand, is even worse. Because, again, Chiwetel Ejiofor's character, besides the fact that he is giving just such a laughable and hammy performance, I didn't really feel like he was in this movie enough. Yes, he definitely is there, but you don't really feel his presence throughout the movie. Honestly, there's so many scenes that it just feels like are dragging the film down. There's a lot of scenes that are just Wahlberg's character getting this information, having to process this information, being told by another character what he's capable of, and because of that, meanwhile, we have this looming threat in the background that really doesn't have much to do in the movie until a certain point. And I needed more from that group. I needed more from a lot of these characters, but especially the nihilist group. I really would have liked a scene with them. I really would have liked to see more of their, mindset and their way of life, because I think that would have made the movie a lot more interesting, but the film isn't really interested in that nuanced point of view. The film isn't really interested in diving deep into either side. Instead, it just wants to do it in such a basic and, lazy manner, and it really infuriated me, because I just kept thinking about how much better this movie could have been overall, but Again, I think the screenplay is just, it's so utterly messy here, and there's so many characters where I'm struggling to figure out how they even play a role into this movie. Toby Jones's character, I don't remember what he did. He's here, but I don't remember what he did. I don't remember what role he really played. Jason Mantzoukas as well, I don't remember anything about his character. He's not very memorable to me. The only characters I remember, besides the ones I couldn't stand, is Sophie Cookson's. I feel like she was the only character that had a significant amount of growth, that actually felt like they were trying to do something with her. You understand that she's someone that really is inspired by Mark Wahlberg's character. She sees a lot of hope in him. She wants to do what she can to get him on this right path, to get him to this point. And so you really do find yourself liking her. You find yourself latching on her. That's the only character I found even a little bit of interest in. I found to be even a little bit likable in this movie. Everyone else I could not stand. I couldn't care less about, and I just think that the writing is just such a mess here, and I couldn't believe so much of what they were doing. It's predictable, but it's also confusing, if that makes any sense. That's the best way to describe this movie, is that the writing is predictable, but yet it's still so confusing what's going on throughout it, and I just, I did not like the writing here at all. The action in this movie, though, you think at least maybe the action can be the saving grace of this movie, and, yeah, no, that's definitely not the case here at all. The action here is so piss poor and so laughably done. I mean, I couldn't believe some of the lunacy of these action sequences. I'm not reviewing a Fast and Furious movie right now. That's coming in the next review, but I feel like I am, because the way some of these action sequences are conceived are just are executed is utterly ridiculous and just doesn't work at all. Like, any laws of physics completely thrown out the window, any sense of care, any sense of, trying to create something that's generally suspenseful, it's just not here. I mean, there's so many scenes that I just couldn't believe that this is what they decided to show. This is the action sequence they decided to go with. The climax of this movie especially is so laughable. I couldn't believe what they were actually doing when it came to this action sequence. It truly made me speechless in the worst way possible, and I couldn't believe what they were doing with a lot of these action sequences. The cinematography as well, it just feels so bland. Like, this feels like a film they could have just, thrown onto Netflix and nobody really talks about it, and it's just really disappointing. I feel like this film should have a really, unique and distinctive look to it, and it doesn't at all, and the action sequences definitely do not deliver either. They're just so utterly ridiculous and absurd, and it's not in a fun ridiculous way. They are taking this so seriously. They want you to be on the edge of your seat. They want this to be a really suspenseful experience, and it's just not. It's just dumb. It's so dumb what they decided to do, and all of the action sequences, I just thought were complete trash here, and I couldn't believe what they were doing. The score, I don't really remember here, but it's Harry Gregson Williams, so I guess it was pretty good. And the editing, this film is way too short, definitely. Even though, like I said, there are a lot of scenes that do drag, I do think this film was a lot shorter than it should have been. I think this film should have easily been at least 2 hours. We could have had a lot more time to flesh out these two groups, but the pacing is also so incoherent throughout this movie. The film starts off very slow-paced, and then it really is kind of like a race to the finish at the end. And I just think that the pacing here was kind of abysmal, as is the entire movie. Infinite as a film really is just such a giant disaster. It has a lot of really good ideas, but it sacrifices them it executes them in the worst way possible. You have actors that are good here, but they don't fit the roles that they're in. Action sequences that are downright comical at points. Writing that is just so utterly confusing, but yet it also feels very really lazy and basic, Infinite overall is just such a huge disappointment of a film. It has directing as well from a good director that feels completely devoid of his creative vision, that feels completely devoid of his usual style, and in general you have what just feels like such a lazy action film. Honestly, I'm not too surprised that this film was dumped onto Paramount Plus because it feels like that's kind of where it was supposed to go. This is a film that they just didn't have a lot of faith in, and by the time that it was done, nobody really wanted to do anything. Nobody really wanted to look over the film. Nobody wanted to, maybe suggest making a second draft. They just kind of said fuck it, and they dumped it onto Paramount Plus. And honestly, I had the same exact attitude watching this film. Infinite, it was a truly horrible experience, and I am going to give it overall a D. Paramount Plus, I really do want this streaming service to work. I really do. I think that they have a lot of good ideas, but aside from the iCarly revival and those amazing Big Brother live feeds that we're getting, and I guess some other reality stuff on there, really not delivering in the way that they want to so far. If they really want to, become a legitimate streaming service, they need to start acquiring better films, and this is not it. This is not the way to go at all. Refrain from doing this at all costs, and it's not surprising that this film came out and nobody really ended up talking about it, because it really is just that throwaway overall. But other than that, guys, in my review of Infinite, let me know what you guys saw this movie. I'll lift your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.